but there were a lot of things that I saw that could have made me really angry. Um, and I had to be very conscious of not allowing my anger to take over and not allowing my anger to change the way that I see people and see the conflict, and um, inform the way I approach this work. And it was challenging because seeing people commit mass acts of violence against other people makes me angry. And whether that's, no matter what group that is, and the justification of violence, it makes me angry. And I had a lot of conversations where I was talking about this with somebody yesterday. I like try to practice radical empathy, like through my work and through in life in general. And what I experienced when I was in Israel and Palestine right now is that so many people are really struggling to empathize with what the other side is going through because they have been victimized in such an acute way themselves. And they are still going through it. Everybody who wakes up in Israel or in Gaza or the West Bank right now, there is an acute cycle of trauma that they're in, and they have PTSD, but they wake up in the morning and it starts fresh again. And there is such a small amount of space for empathy for others right now. And at first, it was really bothering me that in all these conversations I would go to, I would find like a lack of empathy. And it wasn't because of hatred, it was because of so much energy and so much concern was everybody's own families and own communities acute suffering, that there just wasn't like the bandwidth, or there wasn't the
Mhm.
space or the capacity to empathize, not out of cruelty, but out of an inability to. um, and I realized that I had to empathize. I had to even empathize with everybody's, not everybody, but most people's inability to find empathy in this situation, because the suffering is so massive and so acute for everybody. Um, and it was hard. I've never experienced something like that before. That it's just, I experienced myself needing to understand that people aren't able to understand, or empathize with people who aren't able to empathize at this moment in time. And that was like challenging for me, because I don't want to be a mouthpiece for people who are just who cannot, at a certain point see the humanity in somebody else. But that's the reality of the situation. I realized that, like, I'm trying to do one thing, but at the basis of it, I'm trying to show the truth, and I'm trying to share real emotions and the real story. And somebody's lack of empathy, while like hard to come to terms with, it's also legitimate. So that was a challenge, for me as well, and to kind of like maintain my own understanding for all of these people who are really suffering, and are really in crisis, and who really feel like their homes are on fire, and asking them to empathize with the people who set their homes on fire right now might be a little, insensitive on my part, whether that's, an Israeli or a Palestinian. Um, so that was challenging, and it remains challenging. And I think it kind of like reframed the way I think about like who the audience might be from this work. For this work, it might be too raw for Israelis or Palestinians to really take this in right now, because they're in such a deep wave of crisis. But for the American public, who I think is largely extremely biased no matter what side they're on, and are not allowing their views to be challenged, that I think is who this like body of work is really for. People who have just kind of like accepted and adopted a certain way of thinking about this conflict, without trying to empathize with how, you know, people on quote unquote the other side are feeling or what they're going through, their experiences, um, because either they don't really have a deep understanding of the history of the conflict or the current dynamics of the conflict or the culture, or the experiences, but they're so vocal and loud about their beliefs in the situation that I think it's making things much worse for the people who are actually living it. So I want to create understanding for the people who are, you know, surrounding the conflict, because it seems like everybody has an opinion on it,
Yeah,
and I
yeah,
think a lot of people's opinions are extremely biased, um, towards either side, and it's doing a lot of it's making things a lot harder to reconcile for the people who are actually living this conflict day to day.